This part about human websites and the general idea right now that there are enough human websites going on and it's a matter of individual free will. The situation is not like that. The situation is too combative. The situation is too dire and threatening for us not to use the internet in every way possible to preserve the human species. I've got some notes here. I like to use notes and then try to explain them to you. If you read the message that these videos go with, you already know what I said about human websites do not have to be in the main flow of the human discourse, the human purpose to survive and to reach the stars. It is more beneficial to all of us if there are many human websites that show the variety and the differentiation of the human species. Differentiation. You're used to hearing about bullshit and queer shit diversity. The real term is differentiation. This will demonstrate what we are defending to begin with. Right now, everything's focused on these mainline websites like my own. This will illustrate the human species, which is what this is all about. It will show the entire scope and spectrum of the human species. That's important. Really important. It will show what it is all about requiring many websites of many descriptions. There's no reason to think that you are in a niche. There's no reason to think that you are in a shadow zone or a shadow area. And we do not want to see you. Or you've been pushed into a corner by all of the queer shit assholes spouting political correctness propaganda 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you feel diminutive, you feel shunned, you feel wrong, you feel out of place. You feel like a shadow creature and you should not have your own website because the scum, the things that have already ridiculed you for having human talents and human virtues might not like it. So you feel reticent, you feel reluctant, you feel your website would not be worth anything. That's exactly the opposite of the truth. If you're a human, we need your website. To show what it is all about requires many websites and many descriptions, all going in the same direction. There is a main channel, there's a main flow. We need the entire nebula of the species. Demonstrative, showing, show-like. Deliberately overdone. Deliberately exuberant. Really, really positive in attitude. Really celebratory. Celebrating being human. We don't need a gradient where the further you get from the main flow, the weaker everything is. We need the entire nebula really jacked up and really optimistic. Really at it. Really with a good, dynamic, active attitude. We're part of the human species. We may be way over here, and we were dumped into shadows by our queer shit enemies before, but we now know we are part of the human species. And we've got a big attitude about that. We need a big nebula of the species represented by websites that's very opportunistic, very active, very looking for any way to demonstrate that they are human and this is humanity. Look for opportunities. Opportunize the opportunists. Look at their weaknesses, their bullshit, their queer shit. It's all weakness. Override it, overcome it. Look for opportunities where you can drive in the message. You are human too. This is part of the humanity. This is our variety. And together the entire nebula moves on one direction, one pathway, one course. Not just a mainline flow. Not a gradient where the further away you get, the weaker you are and the more absurd you are. No. Do your best everywhere. And all of us, together, we move in the same direction. It will work. Believe me, it will work. Spread out as much as possible to show all possible variations that we exist as. This is our existence. This is what we are. This is who we are. We're not going to be stepped on anymore. To hell with queer shit. Where do you think it came from to begin with? This will create a cross-section of humanity for the viewing by ourselves and anyone who is currently a slave of the SQLD, satanic and queer lying dead, and wants to be a human being. I get accused of relegating slaves to eternal damnation and having no sympathy for them. At this time, we are not showing the great variety of the human species. What an understatement. Talk about an understatement. Wow. We're not showing anything. We're just showing this main thread, this main line direction, like an arrow. We're showing the arrow, but not all of the attachments. This arrow has an entire nebula of variety and differentiation called the human species. And the entire thing has to move in one direction, while at the same time bouncing around in all kinds of varieties and differentiation at the same time within itself. But moving along, moving up and ahead. Getting to these labels that they're trying to kill us with. Straight and other labels are created to bind us like packages and to move us left or right or up or down, wherever the propagandists wish us to be at any one time for any one topic that they wish to control. Certainly you do not think that propagandists have one goal in mind per month or per week. No, their battle game, their battleground board is just like a map at a war room in a world war. And they've got dozens of propaganda attempts going on at the same time, hopefully overlapping and leading into each other. But they think in terms of weeks and days, even hours. They'll change their propaganda between morning and night. They'll blame it on news-breaking events. Right. On the contrary, our real width and depth and height, our real width and depth and height in 3 dimensions must be recognized by everyone else on this planet. Even if they are so insane and so dependent upon signs and labels and stupid simple identities that they have to create 1,000 of those labels in order to encompass the greatness of the human species. If that is their plight, then they will have to do so. They will get tired of that and break down, and the queer shit idea of reducing us with simple identities, ID labels, will break down. It's finite. Propaganda itself has to stay coherent and cohesive, or it just flops all over the place. It gets very sloppy, stupid, unmanageable, untenable. From a medicine ball of coherency filled with evil, it turns into an unwieldy, angry octopus. No longer manageable by the propagandists. And if we pound them with our identities, our real selves, to the point where they need 1,000 of these stupid labels to encompass the human species, that's a huge octopus for them to handle. They cannot take that. They will break down. This sickening filth that they are controlling so many people with now will vaporize. Will have to be. Gone. Will not be able to function. Unless they completely degenerate into babbling absurdity, which is possible. They will have to recognize that the humans are something that they cannot deal with, and hopefully that they will put them out of the propaganda business forever. If they cannot deal with it, especially if it turns on them, especially if it becomes obvious even to the most stupid idiot that has been lied to that the propaganda is not working anymore. I mean, we're talking about raving lunacy like you haven't seen outside of the hideous Boston horror zone. I've seen it happen. I've seen propaganda go absolutely insane and become uncontrolled inside the hideous Boston horror zone. I know what it looks like. It becomes completely impossible to maintain, and they start to drool and foam at the mouth and gyrate with their eyes, and they begin to babble. When that happens, I hope you believe this, because this is real. This is what happens. When the propaganda becomes completely chaotic, the dependence in the audience upon the propaganda dependence that exists day by day, soaking up the propaganda, whatever that is for the day, they begin to drool. They begin to foam at the mouth. They freeze. anywhere. They freeze in their automobiles and have accidents. They freeze on off-ramps. They freeze on on-ramps. They freeze at traffic lights. They freeze in the aisles of supermarkets. They freeze on the sidewalks. And they get this unbrained stare. It's called the 100-mile stare. They get this frozen, dumb look on their faces. And their bodies freeze in whatever position they were in at the time. But often they just sort of go limp. Some of them will freeze in the midst of doing something as reality strikes. And reality strikes hard. It's like a sledgehammer blow. Now that impact freezes some in the middle of doing something. But a lot of them go limp. And sort of like hang. Like they were hanging from a clothes hanger. And they stare. And you can walk around them. And they're frozen. They're immobilized. And they stare. And the worst ones foam at the mouth. Their propaganda is our enemy. Make it impossible to function with propaganda. Cripple their lies against us, even if they end up foaming in the mouth, foaming and gyrating, or just hanging loose in your front yard. Use a great variety of human websites. Force upon the world the very wide and deep and high identity of the human species. Make it absolutely apparent that we are multidimensional, multi-talented, multitasking, and splendid in our complexity. I will leave this last page for the next one. You'll just love it.